We're not altogether different than most technology providers. We sell Windows and SQL and Office primarily to the people that are holding the technology budget, which is the central IT and business unit IT in a lot of the companies that we deal with. And there's this dynamic going on. It's been talked about this morning of business units going rogue because they're impatient or they just feel empowered or all the above. And I had this situation a couple years ago, or an account manager of a large financial services company in Europe called me and said, I'm bringing my customer to Redmond for an executive briefing. I need you to do an hour on cloud strategy. Can you give a presentation? I said, sure, happy to do it. So I show up at our executive briefing center. The customer is there, the senior executive with a lot of his lieutenants and staff. And we did the thing where we go around the table and introduce everybody. And none of these people were from IT. They're all from marketing. And I said, this is quite weird, you know. And I did my cloud presentation, and I talked to the account manager afterwards, and I said, what's going on here? We're doing a technology briefing for this customer, and IT isn't in the room. And he said, well, this is kind of this is a odd situation. I go back to Europe 3 months later and tell the account manager, hey, I'm going to be in town. Do you want to go make a sales call? Salespeople are always looking for an excuse to yeah, Tim's in town. Let's just meet for no reason. So, so I go talk to this customer, and the opening question is, hey, it was great meeting you back in Redmond. How are things going since we talked? And he goes, oh, I'm just managing the politics. I said, well, what's that about? And he said, oh, IT found out about our little trip, and now they're all up in arms, and I have to manage all this crap on the back end. And I started thinking about it afterwards, going, this is precisely what not to do. And I started thinking about Microsoft. If we want to earn the role of trusted advisor in these companies, maybe we have to play the role of Switzerland and counsel some of these business units to say, look, if you don't bring IT to the table for this briefing, we can't support it, because you're gonna break the system. And it's hard to have that conversation without sounding like you're just trying to FUD the business unit to death because the budget's sitting someplace else and you want to make the sale. It's hard to do that without coming off like a salesperson huckster. But I think there are dire implications for governance, regulatory compliance, everything that we've talked about here today, if both of these groups aren't coming to the table at the same time. And so I talked to a lot of people in our field sales about this. They see these kind of goofy behaviors going on from time to time, and it's a tough thing to manage because you get yourself embroiled in your customers' politics when you do that, and that's just an uncomfortable situation for a salesperson to be in.
Well, I would imagine when you go in and you talk to these groups, the end users, the people who are the technology buyers in effect,
Mm-hmm.
Want to hear different things or want to know about different things than the IT folks who are charged essentially with governance, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, in a way, what are some of the differences in what these two different communities are looking for to hear from you?
Well, I think speed, new, relevant. I think the expectations of what technology does and can do for you in terms of being enjoyable to use and having that experience is pleasant to look at are set at home. Right, it's set in the living room. It's set by the game console. It's set by the tablet. It's set by the, the new computer in your kitchen. And then you go to work and you're using, a Windows XP machine that's 5 years old, and it just feels like a come down. It feels like a big step down. That's really the catalyst for all this consumerization that's going on. And so I think speed being on the kind of the front edge of what technology can do for productivity is a big deal. I know a lot of the companies surveyed that have embraced consumerization or all these BYOD type practices have reported productivity gains from their people. And so if you do it right and you do it safely, make sure the brakes are on the car, it can actually have real gains to the business in terms of people not having to come to work and sit in the office to get access to corporate resources. They can work mobile and be productive in that way. Well, we have we've taken a much different. I'll just be very blunt. We've taken a different attitude toward open source. I mean, a lot of the things that we've shared about open source in years past, I think have not been helpful to Microsoft as the world has moved toward that model for certain classes of applications. And so as we've seen leadership changes over the years, I think attitudinal changes inside the company toward not only open source as a model for development of technology, but the role of open source developers for people that we want to win, right? We want them to build apps on Windows. And so support for standards like HTML5 as a first-class application platform in Windows 8 is a step in that direction. Support for Java, Python, Ruby, Node.js if you want to write server-side JavaScript on Windows Azure and Windows Server. We've forged partnerships with all those companies and providers, forged partnerships with Apache. All the energy in MapReduce was around Hadoop. Microsoft Research kind of tried to do some MapReduce thing, nobody cared, so he said, let's just go talk to Hortonworks. Next thing you know, you have full-on support for Hadoop in Windows Azure and Windows Server. All the service endpoints in Windows Azure support REST, Atom Pub. I mean, just all the open source protocols, open standard protocols you can imagine. And there's two reasons for that. Obviously, there's a lot of energy around these technologies, and as evangelists, we want to get developers on our stuff. And more importantly, I think it's just becoming increasingly relevant in enterprise apps for the reason that Bill, you talked about with mobile first, and because of the question that I got earlier. I still think it's a little bit ahead of its time relative to enterprise, because a lot of the people that work in enterprise building apps are pretty skilled in Java and C++ and C#. And they just don't have that core knowledge of dynamic languages and scripting languages. And then the people who have been building enterprise apps for a long, long time will tell you that JavaScript sucks and that it's slow and that these things aren't ready for prime time and you can't do high volume transactions with REST and all this other crap. That'll get straightened out over time, but I think we're kind of in this awkward adolescence phase of open source technologies and dynamic languages showing up in enterprise apps.